One angry taxpayer. How a stay-home mom busted NASA for faked Mars images. In this presentation, you will be seeing proof NASA's images of the Curiosity rover on Mars are in fact staged here on Earth. Our first example that we're going to take a look at here looks a bit of a mess. It's the robotic arm. And on the color image on the right, if you look at the red circle, there is a brown strap that's kind of looped over there. A lot of Curiosity's straps are kind of a brownish, greenish, khaki color. But when we look to the left in this black and white image, which is where all the fun is, that's where all the staging crew swaps things out and has a lot of fun. If you look in the red circle, there is a white square. Now, what is in that red circle is the same thing that should be in the other red circle in the color image. These should be identical. It should be a dark strap. But when we look at the enlargement, we actually see what looks like a white piece of paper, or perhaps just something imprinted on what would have been the brown strap. It has text. The big top letter word looks like it's in cursive and black, and then small text underneath. It looks like it was projected onto that strap, some type of text. Very small, and most people probably would not have noticed. This is an excellent example of where details matter. In this particular location, Curiosity spent about 2 weeks at this site that NASA even nicknamed and called it Snake River. There was a lot of activity there. And this series of images shows quite clearly that the staging crew kind of dropped the ball. If we look on the left at Sol 159 at this particular image, and all three of these have really been taken almost in identical locations, you see there's nothing above that open space where the red arrow is pointing. But we go to Sol 160 and we now see that a series of rocks or material has been added. There are different shapes and colors, and quite clearly has been added. And then 2 days later, which was the next time an image was shot at this location, those rocks have now been removed. Here we have an excellent example of the creativity that the crew has used and gotten away with for years. On the left is a color image of the robotic arm, and it looks like it's in its resting position. We're kind of looking at it up on the side, and that is the elbow joint there. And where the red arrow is pointing to is a bracket that has 4 screws, and to the right looks some kind of a sheath, a gold sheath of some kind. Well, if you look over to the image on the right in the black and white, which is where the crew always changes things and has fun, they've taken that same image and now they've inserted what appears quite clearly as a man's face. You see the eye, the nose, and an open mouth. Now, just to prove that this isn't just a case of paranoia, we have gone back to that original color image and we changed it to black and white to show as a comparison how it still would not look and have the appearance of the profile of a face in black and white. In this image, we're studying the exact same location on the front of the robotic arm, which is where the drill is. We're looking at the outside large stabilizer bar for the outside of the drill. And inside that red square is a tiny little screw and pretty much nothing else. But when we look at the other image on the right from Sol 1521, it's a very different story. We're seeing a white rectangular object with black pattern and drawings on it that has now been inserted. Where did that object come from? And who put it there? Now this image is a really interesting one. The full image is shown on the left, and we're looking down from the mass cam view, and we're looking down at the center right wheel of Curiosity. And in the red circle, you should be able to see quite clearly a black number 7. How did that get there? Well, if you look in the enlargement on the right, they would have us believe that this section, now let me back up. If you go back to the image on the left, you see a series of holes. There's 3 rows of cutouts in the wheel. JPL wanted to do this, so they took the lettering from JPL and put it into Morse code and dug out the shape of the Morse code in the wheel. And then so every time a wheel would trek around, Curiosity would trek around, it would leave the Morse code for JPL. So the story goes. I digress. The important thing is they would have us believe that these holes, which do get filled up with dirt, they get clogged up with dirt. No problem with that. But now all of a sudden they would have us believe that this clogged up section, somehow the dirt fell out and formed a beautifully shaped black number 7. But I do have a problem with that. In that same photo shoot on that same day, this other image was also taken by the right navigation camera. And only 20 minutes earlier, that same exact hole was completely empty. So they would have us believe. Now, the Curiosity didn't move during this photo shoot. Once she parks and takes her images, she doesn't move. So they would have us believe that somehow the wind came along, filled this hole up with dirt, and then another wind came along and magically made a depression in that dirt to create a perfectly shaped black 7. They have a lot of fun with the wheels. This is the front left wheel of Curiosity. You see the beautiful color image on the right, which helps us to see the details, which are very much missing in the black and white images where they start having fun. And you can see what I'm talking about. On the right, you can see that there are 2 series of screws. There's actually 3 if you go to the top tier. But where the red arrow is pointing, we see a series of screws that are separated by little dividers. Now when we go to the black and white image, we can see only the first screw, and then all of a sudden there is this triangular shaped blob on top of the rest of them. This object has been added and only allows us to see the first screw. So there's our first clue that the crew was having some fun with this image. This is one of my favorite images out of the 500,000 images or so that I've captured. The large original image is presented on the left and the red arrow is pointing. Now this is called the brush, the dirt removal tool. It's the DRT, and you see the color image there. It's basically 2 brushes and there's a little silver peg in the middle between it, but they're just 2 brushes. That's all it is. But somehow, when we look at the image on the right, the black and white image, the crew decided to have a lot of fun with this. Now, inside the red circle on the left, you see the first brush. Fine, no problem. Then you see the little silver peg poking up. But then after that, oh my goodness, what is this? It reminds me of the movie Airplanes that they made, that Pixar movie made, and it's about airplanes, and it looks like that little airplane character that was in there, and they just kind of had some fun with that, but clearly that is not the other brush. This is another fun image. On the color image on the left, the way they stage this image, they'd have you believe that you're looking at one giant piece of equipment. You're not. There's a tower in the front, and behind that is another black object, and then down behind that are 2 black hoses. And so what they've done in the black and white image, again, I've zoomed in, you're not seeing the full image, I'm just showing a side-by-side comparison. And everything is exactly the same, except where the black hoses are, there's something flat laying there. And on top of that is what looks like one could call a rock, some object, that is now resting on top of that little platform that shouldn't be there. Those hoses just protrude out, and there should not be a flat object on top. Throughout Curiosity, mostly on her arms, there are some straps that are a brown, green, khaki colors we see on the right. This is a pretty easy one to detect. If you look on the right, the brown strap comes up from the bracket, And you see it literally folds over on itself, and there's a small bracket that it tightens it together with some rubber bands, and then it loops completely around itself. Well, when we look on the image on the left from Sol 1421, that is not the case. The brown strap comes up, it folds over, it's rubber banded, but then when it comes back out, it is now a shiny, reflective white strap. Here we're going to see a really good example of the creativity the staff uses in the black and white images. On top, we're taking a look at the upper left corner of Curiosity, where she's got some straps. And just beneath where the red arrow is pointing, there's 2 tan wires that have been banded together in multiple places. And then when we go down to the black and white where the fun begins, you can see a very different story. Now you look closely and not very hard to see, it's now been covered or replaced with what looks like some kind of reflective, shiny material that it completely covers the open space. You can't even see those wires with the banding anymore. It's got a reflective material on it. Extraordinary image number 1. This image is Sol 1223, and it's been deleted from the raw images for quite a while. I suspect there aren't many locations to get a copy of this. This might be one of the few remaining. This was deleted for a very important reason that I'm about to share with you. All right, before we get started, I just want to do a little education here on the robotic arm. In the image on the left, we see that the robotic arm has rotated completely to the left as far as it can go. And it is the upper arm is parallel to the ground, and the forearm is perpendicular in an upright position. And the same again in the image on the right. We actually see a little bit of the turret up top of the image. And again, we're looking at the robotic arm consisting of 2 parts. All right, so let's take a look and figure out why this was deleted from the raw images. We're going to compare the image on the left to the one on the right. The equipment at the elbow joint is really what we're looking at. And they're both actually in the same position, although the forearm in the image on the left is straight ahead, and on the right it is perpendicular straight up. Regardless, the rest of the equipment should be identical, but it's not. On the left, we're looking into a white open tube that is clearly pointing down and away towards the left on the ground. If you look on the right, the image which shows the correct view of Curiosity's upper arm, which is extending out. Think of the robotic arm just like your own. The source of the robotic arm, the arm should be coming from Curiosity, which is the source of the arm. In the image on the left, it's not connected to anything. There's not even an end cap on it. It's just exposed white tube. It would have the black capping on it, and it is facing the wrong direction. The arm comes from where you're basically sitting. This is proof that this image could not exist. So now you can see why this image was deleted. Front section is pointing away from us instead of coming from us. And there's no end cap, it's a raw edge. Curiosity's upper arm wouldn't have that. Extraordinary image number 2. This image can't but help jump out at you. So here we're looking at an azimuth motor, just hanging out there in the front of Curiosity. Nothing holding on to it, nothing's attached to it. Extraordinary image. Surprised it wasn't deleted, but probably because they knew that nobody would figure out why it should have been deleted. Let's take a look. A little education first. There are 4 azimuth motors that potentially could have been that motor. Number 1 is the base of 1 and 2 are basically connected, and they are what rotates the arm out and around of curiosity. So we're going to rule those out. Number 3 is the wrist joint that connects to the robotic tools, or the turret, if you will. So we're going to rule that one out, because if it was the turret, we would have seen the turret. We would have seen the other parts, but they weren't there, so we have to rule that one out. That leaves us with number 4, Curiosity's elbow joint. And here's an image of the elbow joint. If you look at it, it looks awfully much like the same. By golly, we got it. It is it. That's the elbow joint. Okay, so now we've identified which motor it was. Now we got to figure out, how did it get in that position? If you see on the left, there are 2 arms. The first one you see on top is the upper arm. The one pushing down and away is the forearm, which connects to the tools. So somehow we're to believe that this motor, the arms were somehow turned in a way that they really couldn't go, so that they could get this photo shoot in. Someone had to have been holding it at the end, because the arms would have been tucked in a way in a position they physically could not go, so that they would have cleared the image and not be showing in this picture. See, this is another image showing exactly what I'm saying. So those 2 arms would have had to have been pulled away off to the left. And here's the second problem. Let's just say they did that. Let's just say the arms were there and that motor comes all the way forward to us. Well, that motor is at the end of Curiosity's upper arm. That's about 3.5 feet long. Well, if you look at where that would have, just imagine that coming forward, it would land over here near the observation tray. If it truly turned into itself, it would have landed over here about the observation tray. Now, look where the red arrows are pointing. Somehow that elbow joint would have to land where the red arrow is, like it did in the right image. But if you look, the elbow joint isn't even in this image. If it rotated forward, it would land over at the checkered observation tray, but it has to land over where that red arrow is. So what our study of the 4 motors proved to us is that each one, based on its location and the way it is attached to Curiosity, has been ruled out as being capable of being in this position. That leads us to only one conclusion: that one of the motors was held on its own to be staged in this way. There is no other conclusion that can be drawn.